Hello and welcome to my little YouTube channel. I'm glad you joined me. My little one here, she's going to sit with me. And there's just a couple of things I want to go over. I'm writing another book called The Gods of Ithavoll. The Gods of Ithavoll are the remaining gods that are left over after Ragnarok. And they sit there in green fields with golden tables. And they are the sons of Thor and the sons of Odin. And Balder returns, Hoth returns. And they think of the wonderful old times that there were, and they speak with awe and reverence and respect, so on and so forth. But the new book that I'm writing really is kind of it's really kind of clicked some of the things that I've read about and seen. And a lot of the time, the people that I deal with. But it really started with Tacitus. When I read Tacitus on Germania, he was talking about the people, and he spoke first about the all thing, and that usually they were forced away because a number of people would be late. They would be taking their time. And then he goes on to describe that in the intervals of war, they spend much of their time in hunting and still more in doing nothing, without any sort of object except sleeping and eating. All the boldest and most warlike men have no employment whatsoever, while the care of the house and its belongings and the cultivation of the fields are abandoned to the women and old men and to the weaklings of the family. The warriors lie torpid. Amazing inconsistency. The same men love sloth and hate peace. It is customary for the chiefs, so on and so forth. They take special pleasure in giving gifts from neighboring tribes. They have, moreover, learnt from us by this time to accept money. They do not dwell in cities and will not even suffer their settlements to adjoin each other. They plant themselves separately and independently in some favorite spring or plain or grove. They do not lie at their villages like ours, where the houses join and are massed together, but every man makes his abode with a clear space around it, possibly as a precaution against fires or from pure ignorance for the art of building. They never quarry stone or tiles, but employ rough timber for everything. It goes on and how they dress and how they eat and all the other things. A simple people and a simple life. You know, we often like to talk about the wolf pack and the various very successful organizations, be they military or otherwise, talking about the wolf. But you know, if you'll ask the Basque people in France, they'll say that the bear is our brother, that we are from the bear. The Norse, obviously, the Norse myth of creation is that we are from a tree. But there's a very independent, very fierce idea that goes with this mindset of people that are from this part of the world, named our ancestors. When you look at some of these things with ADHD, the concept of reward for doing a task and consequences and punishments for not doing it, a person with ADHD nervous system has never been able to use the idea of importance or rewards to start and to do a task. They know what's important. They like rewards. They don't like punishments. But for them, the things that motivate the rest of the world are merely nags. What they're suggesting here is that the people that have ADHD have a central nervous system that processes information much different than the rest of what they call a normal neural pathway. But I would submit to you that it is one of those things, the idea kind of hit my head, that it's one of those things that is unique to our heritage. That we are the folks that really have that. So I got to looking, okay, what's the prescription rates for Ritalin with regards to diagnosis of ADHD in the United States? And within short order, I found reference to, you know, the prescription rates for whites are 60% higher, and the diagnoses for ADHD are 60% higher than they are for African Americans, Hispanics, and Oriental people. That's a kind of a unique deal. That's a very interesting thing to discover, that we look at the rest of these people that are content to plug away and work their day-to-day jobs and make their living and all these other things, and yet there is an idea that if we give them this medicine, they'll more likely fit in. They'll be able to operate in a normal society and environment. They'll be able to do the work for other people so that they might get rich or whatever. There's a huge section of Asatruers that I talk to, that I work with, that I've dealt with over the years, that that have this mindset, that have this feeling. When they look at all of these other people doing these things, they look like chumps. The call to savagery and masculinity has really touched on that very idea itself, that this is not for us. This is ridiculous. This industrial revolution that brought everyone off the farm and away from the earth to work in these great factories and plants and make some money, you know, and live a good life. And so your parents can be proud of you. Well, he's off in the city and he's doing really well and blah, blah, blah. And then the advent of the nuclear family made it a necessity. There was no longer family to work together towards a common goal or institution or idea to stick together. They were split up, and they went to California, and they went to New York, and they went to Dallas, and they went to these big cities to make it big and start their own little family to kick them off. And we got further and further and further apart as families. And then you look at this effort to prescribe this Ritalin and Adderall and these other stimulant type drugs that are primarily prescribed and diagnosed with your Caucasian people. Some people would rail against that idea that this might be a unique mentality among the European mindset. And they would say, well, that's because you're African American. He doesn't have as much access to medical health care like we do, like anything else. And I think that's malarkey. There is if you look at Tacitus and kind of read through it and then look at some of this other stuff, I begin to really see some kind of connection here. I begin to see a group of people who really wish to embrace the ideas of masculinity and savagery and the wild freedom that comes with, you know, living in your place with a kindred or village near you, but not necessarily on top of you. And I see an effort to make sure, well, we need these people to conform because we need them to work. A lot of people, oh no, that's just ridiculous. But the more I look into it, the more research I find to support this argument that I'm prepared to make with this new book, The Gods in Ithavoll, from the Voluspa, from the Eddas, from this medical research. That article that I quoted from was from summer of 2013, ADD, attitude, and then I recently read another one that went over the prescription rates. They gave me the 60% number. It was presented with a grant from the Department of Health and what they're doing, and this is also within 2013, trying to make sure that more of that Ritalin could reach the African American community to keep them focused and keep them kind of in control, perhaps, maybe, I don't know. That was the time there was a lot of riots going on. Everybody's coming, what do we do about it? If you think that's not something that ever happens, take a look at methaqualone, which is still produced primarily in one country. There was a Dr. Barson there that produced methaqualone quaaludes that people sold, that was distributed by the government to help keep the Africans community subdued. And now it's a huge black market enterprise. It's about the only place on earth you can buy the stuff. That's in South Africa. They stay pretty wild. See that? That's how important it is. So when you get to taking yourself too seriously, you got something like that saying, well, let's take another look at it. Flush your mouth. This is going on YouTube. You're going to be famous. Anyway, that's what this new book is about. I think a lot of times we find ourselves aware of ideas and workings that may not necessarily be conducive to the development of the individual, but more conducive to the development of a group that's going to go to work. The conditioning we undergo when we go to school and the bell rings, and we go to lunch when the bell rings, and we get out of school when the bell rings, and we set up these ideas, and that's always very important. That's what people look at. I mean, that's the standard by which everyone kind of judges is your ability to be a part of society. But I see we tend to bring in people in Asatru who have been through the ringer in some way or other who may not necessarily fit in anymore. They've been through some kind of idea, and it's very difficult for them to go and look at that stuff. It's very difficult for them to go to work and pay attention to some ridiculous nonsense from some man who may or may not have ever proved himself to the same level as you have. They find themselves particularly sensitive to failures. And what do? Well, going to church and bowing your head and bending your knee to ask for a better way or some kind of help or some kind of hope didn't really work. So the next thing you know, you find them in Asatru, and they're working towards, they're trying to find something in this faith of our ancestors, to really inspire that idea of savagery and freedom that people are enjoying a lot of success by embracing once again. There may be the possibility that there are a large number of Asatruers whose neurological pathways do not process information in the same manner that people of importance and wealth and power would wish us to interpret it. The more I look at it, the more I'm convinced that this is one of those kinds of things. You know, if you look at, like I said in my podcast on ABN, if you look at the tale of Judaism and the building of the pyramids, when they built these pyramids, the archaeological research doesn't suggest a huge slave class. It shows a village with skilled artisan and craftsmen and stonecutters and all of these things that would support what would be at that time a very comfortable middle income type of living. They'd have a home and they'd have food to eat, and there would be lots of good things, and you have to wonder, what would this, if that's the case, what would this story of Exodus really be about? Perhaps it would be about liberating a group of individuals who had succumbed to that, trading their time for someone else's dollar, into a new idea and a new land and a new hope that there might be something more to this grand idea. Did they not leave it, believing in it, and enjoy manna from heaven in the deserts? Who's to say that in the 60s rolled around and these people began to turn on, tune in, or drop out, that this groups of individuals didn't also begin to see, hey, maybe it's time for us to look for another way, because this way, while it may have built this wonderful world, has done nothing but indenture people into servitude to all kinds of companies. You trade your time, you get to live in a house, you get to drive a car, and you owe money for all of it. And then you pay every other company in the world, Fortune 500 company, is tapped into your paycheck, so because you need medicine. Somebody says you need medicine, and you have to remember, they call the doctor's office a doctor's practice for a reason, and then you got to have electricity, and then you got to have water, and then all of these things everybody says you need to have, and it takes everything you have. Some people eventually save up some money and kind of break free of that cycle, but what happens to their children? I don't know what the statistics are, but people usually that inherit a lot of money at a young age, I've seen lots of young men inherit companies from their fathers and absolutely ruin it. There was no effort required to earn it. There's a mindset that is rapidly developing with people in Asatru that we expect more. Maybe not necessarily the absolute out-and-out savagery, but definitely a consistent development of the mind, of the body, of the heart, the emotional state of the being, and the spiritual aspect of who we are. And that is coming from Asatru. These people that have found themselves at the edge of society, even though they may possess extraordinarily high IQs and a fantastic ability to accomplish a task if they deem it important. And we are not finding those tasks that we deem important very often. Just something to think about. I'm putting a lot of good work into this book. The other books that I've written are doing well. Eager's Feast is a very good book, as well as Nobility. They continue to strike home with people literally around the world. I highly encourage you to check them out. You can pick them up on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can pick them up, I don't know if Nordic Circle's carrying them anymore, but the AFA, runestone.org carries a bunch of them. And like I say, the podcast, abncom.com, or on Facebook. These are things we're going to continue to discuss. If you haven't read Tacitus on Germania, I highly encourage you to do so. It's a fantastic demonstration or written dissertation concerning these tribes that stopped the Roman army at the Rhine. But it also true. Some of what he wrote was kind of written to make fun of or denigrate the status of Roman civilian life at the time. It was heading downhill pretty quick. One of the reasons Christianity got its ugly neck in there and managed to screw it all up. But I thank you for your time. Feel free to share these, leave comments on them. I'm sure people always have something to say. And come along with us. Let's see if there really is a brand new horizon. Let's see if there is some kind of freedom to enjoy. Let's see if there is some kind of opportunity out there other than the daily grind, the humdrum, punch at time clock, soul-killing idea of working in an assembly line in a factory to make someone else rich. That money is all out there. That success is all out there. Let's see what we can do about securing some of that for ourselves.